and you're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. And joining us now is Steve Moore, former Chief Economic Advisor to then-candidate Trump, also been an informal economic advisor, is also the one of the chief architects of the Trump tax cut, which has revitalized our economy. And Steve Moore was up for federal appointment on the Federal Reserve until the liberals went crazy and caused them all kinds of havoc. So he didn't do that. But now he's got other things going on. And he is joining us today. Steve, great to have you with us.
Hi, John. Good morning.
So, Steve, I want to talk a little bit about a couple of things. I want to start with this is kind of gone under the radar screen, but those of us that are advocates of Trump's America First policy, which is defining now the positions of what was the old Whig Republican Party in the United States, one of the issues is buying American. And I want to get to uranium. That's why we had you on today. Right now, the U.S. is importing 99% of its uranium. This was after we sold one of our uranium companies under Clinton to the Russians. So I'm still trying to figure that one out. Of the 99% that we're importing, over 40% of that is from countries that are not exactly our friends and allies, like Kurdistan, Russia, etc. And the Trump administration is looking at an American First policy where a certain percentage of uranium would have to be produced in the United States, that there would be a floor for that so we control our own uranium destiny. Can you elaborate on that, Stephen?
Well, John, it's great to be with you. Thanks again for having me. You're right. This is quite a scandal that's going on. We have more. By the way, it's broader than just uranium. It also includes almost all of our mineral resources. The left wants to do with our mining what they've tried to do with our drilling, which is shut it down. Right? You heard what Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren said that they want to shut down shale oil and gas, which is one of the dumbest ideas I've ever heard, right? I mean, we have millions of jobs because of the shale revolution. We're now energy independent because of it. Well, they want to do the same thing with mining. And so, we have, just as we have more oil and gas resources than any other country in the world, we have way more mineral resources. We're the most richly endowed country in the world in those western states, from Colorado to Montana to Wyoming to, even California and Utah. And we should be using those resources, but what's happened is the mining laws, because of the environmentalists, have become so difficult that we're shutting down our mining in the United States. And there's 30 what they call rare earth metals that are needed for everything from our military weapon systems to, if you want green energy, you're going to have rare earth minerals. If you want your cell phone and your flat top TV, you have to have these. And we're importing that stuff rather than producing it here. And the one that I wrote about last week was uranium. Uranium is necessary for our nuclear power and our nuclear, arsenal with respect to our military. And now we're importing 99% of it. We shut down our uranium mines. And John, you're not going to believe this. Increasingly, you know where we're getting our uranium from?
Where?
Russia.
Unbelievable.
Isn't that stupid? And by the way, now China wants to sell us uranium. I mean, can you imagine two countries that are more hostile to the United States than China and Russia?
It's incredible, Steve.
On them for our nuclear power?
It's incredible.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Let me ask you something. What does this tie this into when the Obama administration allowed our uranium company to be sold to the Russians here in the U.S.? How does that tie into this, if at all?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we all know that this does tie into the, to the Hillary Clinton, scandal where they sold one of our, major resources, Uranium One, and ever since then we've been increasingly reliant on foreign sources for uranium. And look, I think this is a bad deal, not just for our, national security, but it's bad news for our economy too. I mean, John, we're sitting on top of $6 trillion of mineral resources. I didn't say $6 billion. I said $6 trillion of resources. And the left's idea is, just like they say, keep it in the ground for energy, they want to keep it in the ground for minerals too. And by the way, a lot of that is underneath federal lands. so the United States government could charge a royalty to the mining companies, and we could use that money we raised to reduce our national debt.
Why isn't any of this out in the mainstream legacy media?
Because the media loves the groups like the Sierra Club and so on, and we can't mine and we can't drill for oil and gas, and of course if we can't drill for it here and we can't mine for it here, then it's going to be drilled and mined somewhere else. By the way, the mining, look, we're all in favor of very safe environmental rules, and we want clean air and clean water, absolutely. But it takes 10 years to start a mine in the United States. In Australia, it takes 4 years. I mean, it's crazy. It's just the obstacles to getting anything done in this country because the environmentalists, I know a lot of people in Virginia listening to the show know exactly what I'm talking about. But, we have to start taking our national security and our national interest at stake. And by the way, do you think Russia has very strict environmental standards?
No, they have not. Well, the same thing with China. I mean, that's the same thing where I thought the Paris Climate Accord was a complete joke because, the Chinese told Obama, we're building a coal plant a month, and there's no real restrictions on it. There's no filters. We've done nothing. But 2050, come back to us, and we'll take a look at it. That was basically the commitment he had. We're with Steve Moore.
By the way, did you know, John, that not a single one of the major 30 countries that signed the Paris Climate Accord, not one of them is in compliance with the accord, not one of them. The only country that's actually reducing its carbon emissions right now is the United States of America. We're not even part of the climate accord.
It's really unbelievable.
We're doing that, by the way, this is a great little story. The reason we're reducing our greenhouse gas emissions is because we're producing more natural gas, which is a clean fuel, and the left wants to shut that down, too.
I mean, it's really you start looking at these things, Stephen, and breaking them down. They're unbelievable. We're with Steve
By
Moore.
the way, let me just say something, John.
Go ahead, Steve.
What that tells you, when they don't want natural gas, which is a clean fuel, that tells you there's something else going on here.
Right.
I mean, if you really believe that climate change is going to destroy the planet in 10 years, then we would use fuels that would reduce our greenhouse gases. And the two fuels that reduce our greenhouse gases are natural gas and nuclear power, and they're opposed to both of those.
Incredible. Steve, I want to get to President's decision, which would tie into his America First policy agenda. Let's just stick with uranium for a minute, and then we'll move on to some other issues. And what the Trump administration is considering right now, and I love this, is a floor, a minimum of uranium that has to be produced and purchased in the United States. Do you favor that, and what would the percent be?
That's a very good question. I mean, I don't know what the right solution is. There are a lot of possibilities. One possibility would be some kind of tax credit to produce uranium here. Another idea might be to have some kind of a floor, like a quota system, that some amount of it has to come from the United States. I honestly, we've, in our study, which is available on our Committee to Unleash Prosperity .org website, you can look at various options. All I want to do is make sure that we have some uranium production. I mean, we cannot depend on countries like Russia and Kazakhstan and China to provide us in an emergency situation. By the way, John, you and I are old enough to remember the OPEC oil embargoes. Remember that in the 1970s?
Yes.
Well, that was because we were so reliant on the Arabs for oil.
Right.
Do we want to go through that again with uranium and other precious minerals?
I don't think so.
Yeah. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, we learned nothing from history. It's unbelievable.
Well, not only do we learn nothing, but now it gets worse. And I don't see how the Democrats could oppose a policy that said a certain percentage of uranium has to be produced and bought in the United States. There has to be a floor. And that is consistent with the President's America First agenda. And
by the way, John, it's also consistent with U.S. law. There's something called the Defense Production Act, which says that resources that are necessary for our military, we can't be wholly reliant on foreigners for that. I mean, it's just a matter of common sense. And so I think the president's going to make a decision sometime, John. I'm so glad we're doing this interview because sometime in the next 3 or 4 weeks, the president's going to make a decision. He has to decide what to do about our uranium. And I hope that a decision is made that at least we get, 10 or 20% of our uranium in the United States. We're down to about 5%.
See that's also a national security risk, because
of course,
if we're at conflict with countries that are providing 50% of the 90%, and they simply cut it off, we're holding the bag. I mean, look, Steve, that was the president's position in getting our steel industry back. He says, how can you be a first-rate power and not produce your own steel? I mean, you have to be able to produce steel. You can't be buying it from China because they're subsidizing it. That gets back to the beginning of this whole argument with China. Steve, I got a couple topics here. 5 minutes we've got remaining. Number one, you're an economist. You've advised the president the whole way. Why are the Democrats, why do they continually float out this phony recession? I mean, and when are people going to wake up?
Well, because they want a recession. They're rooting against America, and they hate, I've said this many times, I've heard you say it, liberals hate Trump more than they love America. So they don't mind if millions of Americans lose their job if it means that they can retain power, because you and I know what the left, they don't care about poor people, they don't care about minorities, they don't care about, the environment, they care about power, right? That's their whole game. If they want to at all costs reestablish their power base, and that means they have to get rid of Trump. So they're talking down the economy. And by the way, there is no recession. In fact, I have a piece in the Wall Street Journal today that shows middle-class incomes are up $4,100 in real terms since Trump was elected. Let me say that again. A $4,000, $100 increase in incomes in 2.5 years. In the entire 8 years that Obama was president, incomes only went up $1,000.
So that's very impressive.
It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable, and so, but
off the chart.
But yet they're gonna continue to push a fake and phony narrative. And look, Steve, you've been on Wall Street, but aided by the Dow Jones, Goldman Sachs conglomeration that basically wants to do anything they can in order to ensure low rates of production, slave labor, so they can get their bonuses. And so many times something has happened. And the Wall Street Journal, which I'm not a fan of, immediately comes out with some huge editorial, like within a minute of the stock market going down. It was already pre-planned in order to say, see, tariffs are destroying the economy. It's going to be the end of the world. And so that's one of the biggest unholy alliances ever. Let's get to the impeachment inquiry of the president on this whistleblower situation. I know you've looked at the transcript. What do you see here, Steve Moore?
Well, I was worried, when this story broke, that there might be some kind of quid pro quo in that tape. So when I urge every American, John, of good conscience, who wants to be fair-minded, read the transcript. I read the transcript, John. I did not see any quid pro quo there. I didn't see it. And, by the way, wasn't it amazing the Democrats rushed to impeachment before they even read the transcript?
Unbelievable.
Can you believe that? So, no, I don't think there's anything here. I think that this is going to backfire on the Democrats. And I think that, we had 2 years of Russia. That didn't go anywhere. Now they want to do another year of Ukraine. They don't have any bills to create jobs. They don't have any bills to control the deficit. All they want to do is try to undermine the Trump economy.
Well, we shall see how this plays out. Steve, I really think it's going to backfire on the Democrats big time. I mean, they got through the Mueller thing with minimal exposure. They're not going to get through this, Steve, and I think their days are numbered. Thanks for being with us.
I do think that the American people understand that how much was the Russia probe? Like $60 million?
$60 million, they got nothing. I mean, it was absolutely nothing.
Zero. It was a total waste of money.
And time, right? I mean, there's other issues like uranium that ought to be addressed in Congress. Instead, now we've got to spend the next 9 months on all this nonsense. Steve, thanks for being with us. John Fredericks Radio Network.